Come on, Annie. Let's go to the movies.
This is the Cinereelists, episode 629. My name is Kyle.
My name is James.
And my name is Zach.
And we're here to talk movies, movie lists, and movie obsession for the next hour or so. And guys, I gotta say, I'm really excited for this episode today.
Yeah?
Why?
Yeah. Well, because Alex Garland is one of my favorite modern or contemporary directors.
Okay.
So the fact that he had a new movie come out this year, that we got to watch it, we get to review it today, we get to talk Alex Garland in general. Very excited for all of this today.
Nice.
Yeah, this is kind of like Kyle's day at the circus.
Yeah, I mean, he's like my Stanley Kubrick if there wasn't a Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah. You didn't already love him.
Oh, man. Based on the reaction of the movie we're going to talk about today, I think some people would gristle at the idea that you just compared Alex Garland to Stanley Kubrick.
No, I don't think they're on the same plane. But
Okay. I mean, I like Alex Garland too, but
Yeah.
man, that's a tough comparison for sure. So if you hadn't figured it out by the title of this podcast, we're going to talk Civil War this week, written and directed by Alex Garland. And before we jump into that, I need to remind you there's a video version of this podcast. Go check it out at YouTube. Search Cinereelists. Find us there. You can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Cinereelists. Support the podcast, get extra after show audio. I actually have a plan for the after show. It's right here. We'll talk about it later. You guys don't know about it.
All right.
Also, leave us an Apple Podcast review. We'd appreciate that. Or send us a listener email, heyguys@cinereelists.com. The email link is in the description. Send us an email. We'll discuss it on the podcast on a future episode. You guys ready to jump in to Civil War?
All right, we're jumping fast. Let's do it.
Let's do it right after this clip.
Lee, I'm sorry for jamming my way into your ride, okay? I know you're really angry about it, and I know you think I don't know, but...
I'm not angry about that, Jesse. I don't care what you do or don't know.
Okay, but you are angry with me.
There is no version of this that isn't a mistake. I know, because I'm it. Joe and Sammy are it.
It's my choice.
Right. And I'll remember that when you lose your or you get blown up or shot.
All right, that was Civil War. Civil War is a 2024 film. It's a dystopian war film written and directed by Alex Garland and starring Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Moura, Kaylee Spaney, Stephen McKinley Henderson, and Nick Offerman, amongst a few others. The official IMDb plot synopsis for Civil War is a journey across a dystopian future America, following a team of military-embedded journalists as they race against time to reach D.C. before rebel factions descend upon the White House. That's Civil War. What'd you guys think of it?
Well, before we get into it, I want to redeem myself for Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Okay. Why?
Because I know how to pronounce that name that you butchered. Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Which one did I butcher?
The second one.
Okay. How do you pronounce it?
Say it again.
You want me to say it?
Yes, please.
Wagner Moura?
Yeah, he is Brazilian. It's pronounced Wagner Moura.
Oh, okay.
You got Chiweteled.
I
You
got
Chiweteled.
It's not Wagner, it's Wagner.
It's Wagner, yes.
Okay.
Interesting. Would have never guessed. What character did that guy play? Wagner Moura. He's kind of the hotshot.
Yeah, he's
producer
Kirsten Dunst.
on-screen interviewer. Is that what he is?
Yeah, he's the contemporary to Kirsten Dunst.
I liked him.
Yeah,
Right.
he had like you could tell he kind of got off on all of this. Like this is his rush.
Sure.
You kind of.
War
I
journalist.
think there's a type of person that does war journalism,
Right.
and yeah, they enjoy the high pulse rate.
True. Okay. Somebody give us a brief overview of what this movie's about. How about Zach?
Okay. This movie is less how the United States falls apart kind of movie, and it's more about war journalists documenting a civil war in the United States. The country has devolved into like several different factions, all at war at each other, basically going for the throat of the president in D.C. And these war journalists are making their way as quick as possible to D.C. to get the last interview about the president before he gets inevitably assassinated by an overwhelming force that's descending upon the city. And then there is a young, like early 20s-year-old girl who wants to be a war journalist, war photographer, who tags along.
Who I did not realize was Kaylee Spaney until the very end of the movie.
I didn't either. Yeah.
I was like, oh,
yeah,
that's who
Priscilla
that is.
Presley.
Yeah. I have no
That's
idea.
great. Yeah.
I found it interesting how apolitical this movie was.
Okay.
Right. So at no point were we really given a backstory to how this war happened. We don't really know what each side stands for.
Mhm.
There really is at no point in this movie was I rooting for one side or the other, or one faction or the other. Because this movie seems much more concerned about this event is happening and these people want to capture this event for history, and less about, who's behind this event and why is it happening, and, who do we want to win? Do we want the president to live or not? Like, the movie does not care about any of that whatsoever.
I disagree.
You disagree.
I do.
You thought there was good guys and bad guys in this movie.
Oh, there were definitely good guys. I think the reporters were the good guys.
Oh, I'm talking about like the warring
war.
factions. In the war, they're good guys and bad guys.
Sure. I don't know as if they defined it quite as black and white as good guys and bad guys, but I definitely think they were not sympathetic to whatever the president was doing.
I got a little bit of impression, and we didn't talk if we're going to do spoilers for this movie or not.
Sure. I think we should definitely talk spoilers, but maybe make them light, and then maybe a few minutes from now we'll go into deep spoilers.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the movie does talk a little bit about the president in his third term and his use of drones. So, like, you do think, all right, maybe he's on the wrong side of history here.
Sure. And they're going to interview him to ask him, like, a pretty pointed question.
Right, yeah.
There's some assumptions made about how the war is going and things like that that we don't have to talk about right now. But I think I will agree that it's probably not as politically motivated on its face as what most people would expect this movie to be, or like, I don't know, it was advertised a little bit as it was advertised as ambiguous.
Yeah.
But that felt more like they were going to drop something on you in the theater and they weren't just going to say it outright in a trailer. Turns out, no, they're just going to hint at it during the movie. I think there's something there. It's not completely neutral.
I will say there's a lot of times where it's hard to know when they're safe or not safe, or like what they know about their own safety.
Mhm.
Like when they're far away from the front lines, are they in friendly territory? Like this is not a war zone, or is everywhere a war zone? Like it was just unclear like where the fronts are. And
Yeah.
I think the movie would have benefited from just knowing, okay, is everywhere unsafe? That seems unreasonable. Or is just there's like unsafe areas and we're entering into one and here's why it's unsafe. I think that would have made it a little bit less muddy.
Yeah, like I don't want a movie necessarily where every time they go somewhere, a character turns to another character and says, this is the blah blah zone. They're like, yeah, you're right, because that's kind of cheesy. But you do have this new character, as in with Kaylee Spaney, who is at least new to the war journalism. So they could have used her as an audience surrogate to kind of explain, hey, this is what we know about this to her.
Some of the confusion was they would be in a random town, 500 miles away from where the battle is happening in Charleston, right?
Yeah.
And they would just casually pass by like a hospital or like a apartment building with a fresh like missile attack on it. Like one of the offices will be like a huge explosion had gone off and it's on fire. So it happened like within the last, hour. And it's just like, who's attacking this town right now?
Mhm.
It's like nowhere near anything. And it's something that happened a lot in the movie is like wherever they went, there was a fresh dead body that had died within the last day. And it's just like, it just seemed like the war is happening everywhere rather than like they're headed towards the front. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I wonder if it just kind of showed that there is this sort of overall breakdown of society. Like not full zombie apocalypse breakdown, but because there's this open war happening, are some of the norms that we expect to happen in cities also not happening?
Perhaps. I guess the way I think of Civil War is like it's an us versus them, not like everyone against everyone, you know?
Yeah. Did you, I mean, James, maybe you can chime in on this, but like I got the impression that there was sort of three main forces. There was the United States government, the United States Army.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Western fronts, which was California and Texas, who banded together. And then they talked about this Florida faction, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah. But then you also run into groups like Jesse Plemons, and are they just kind of opportunists? So they said, hey, things are...
Yeah.
Right. Like, are they more just militia type of, hey, things are not good right now, so we can kind of make this the Wild West out here?
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, it's never right. It's never always explained what conflicts we're seeing, but I do wonder how many of these conflicts we see were between organized forces and how many of these were like more militia outbreaks that were happening too.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Western forces in California and Texas have like certain military powers. I'm assuming, like the movie makes you assume a lot of stuff about the scenario.
Right. You could assume it's like their National Guard that they militarized.
Sure. Or they just took over all the federal resources in those states. Those states are gigantic. I mean, they rival entire countries in other places of the world. And so the idea that like they would well, maybe we don't go into details yet. We won't go into details of the specifics of the movie until we get to spoilers. But overall, it sounds like you guys were dissatisfied with the amount of detail you got on the actual conflict or maybe motivations of characters they encounter. What about the main characters and the idea of telling the story through this reporter lens? Was that what you thought this movie was? Or because I didn't. I didn't know it was that.
I did not know it was going to be about war photographers, although I like the idea of having a movie centered around war photographers. That's a great way to tell a war movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like the idea, too, that they were seasoned for the most part, with the exception of Kaylee Spaney's character. And so they were very used to, like, just going with the flow of whoever they were embedded with. You know what I mean? They know that the way you get access is to not necessarily judge what those people are doing, but just go with the flow of whoever you're following at the moment. And yeah, I mean, there's specific details that are popping up in my brain that tells you which side the movie's on that we got to get into in spoilers.
Sure, yeah.
Because I think it definitely, as I'm thinking about it even more, pushes you one direction. What do you guys think about kind of the uneasiness of the film? Like, this is not Independence Day. This is like a...
I think this is certainly an anti-war film.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what the sides are, I think they're saying that the war is awful, right? And it's like worst case scenario for our country is to enter a civil war. Like, if you can avoid that at all costs, avoid a civil war, because it's just going to be awful for everyone, I think is the message of this movie.
Yeah. And I think even though this movie has some impressive action war sequences, at no point did it feel like it was glorifying it. And I even found them to be jarring in things like sound design.
Mm-hmm.
Like just the volume of gunfire. And not volume as an amount, but like the actual decibel level. Like, guns were so incredibly loud in this movie, where times the gun would go off and I would jump in my seat. And I think Garland's trying to say, like, hey, this is not like a cool action movie where there's going to be bunches of gunfire and you're going to be along for the ride. Like, I want this to be unsettling, and I don't want you to enjoy these action sequences, even though they are very well staged.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of action movies, and they definitely lower the volume of what actual guns sound like.
Like actual guns are so incredibly loud.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've never personally shot a gun, but I've been around a bunch that have been shot, like a clay shoot, fundraisers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they're violent. Like, even if you're not aiming at another person, just the act of pulling a trigger, having it kick back on you, like, it's a pretty violent experience in general. And I thought the sound design in this movie used the like rifle, specifically like automatic weapon firing, like those sound effects to effectively like jump scare you at times.
Yeah,
you know what I
for
mean?
sure.
For a second, you'd be lulled into some kind of safety, and even if you knew it was coming, it was still much, much louder than what typically. I think typically movies lower that volume, probably just because it takes over. You know what I mean? Like, if you actually mixed gunfire on a realistic level, you would hear nothing else, basically, because it's so loud. And so I liked how this movie did something different, maybe a little more realistic with that. I thought this framing was perfect for a movie that wanted to be subtle with its politics. I don't know how else you tell this story without going one direction or another. Like, by having a third party in the middle, it helped to kind of nullify. Even if the movie leans one way or the other, it's not making it a central thesis of why you're watching, essentially.
Right.
The central thesis then turns into, like, we don't want this no matter what your political leanings are. We're not showing one side being better or morally superior or anything like that. We're just letting you know this is where this leads, and none of it's good.
Do you know what I thought was strange is I do think that this tried really hard not to get into the politics and not try to connect the dots with contemporary America, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps I'm just reading into this too much, but it did seem to me like Nick Offerman was, despite what I just said, a Trump surrogate. In the sense of his first speech, he's talking
Yes.
about how like they're so victorious and they're like, this is the greatest victory of all time, which is a very
Yep.
Trumpian thing to say. And you find out that they're, very close to defeat, right? So, which is a Trumpian irony. He was in a third term, which is something Trump has threatened to do. He disbanded the FBI, which is something Trump has threatened to do. So it did seem like Nick Offerman was somewhat of a Trump surrogate, while the movie was also working very hard to not draw lines between. So I didn't know why he did that. Why didn't they make him completely unlike a president we've had in the past so that we couldn't make connections?
So I think, without getting too into the political weeds, I think it's hard to make a president look autocratic without also then just having parallels to a certain past president who has had autocratic tendencies. I will give you that first speech with this is the greatest victory of mankind. So, like, yes, I'll agree that specifically felt Trumpian, but I think a lot of the other things is just what any autocratic president, dictator of any country to do, to disband the central police, to use weapons against their own citizens. So I think there's unfortunately a very fuzzy line between what Trump does and what dictators want to do, and it's easy to apply them to both.
Yeah, I felt the same way, that there wasn't too much that was Trump specific, but Trump tends to say things that a dictator wants to do. And so,
Yeah.
and so, like, what words do you put in his mouth that Trump didn't say or, vocalize at some point in time? I don't know. Short of like, I want to kill all my enemies, which he's kind of said.
Sure.
At times. Yeah. Even that is fair game when it comes to Trump.
So, I mean, what would you guys kind of say then was like the message of this movie? Because that was kind of something I was thinking throughout a good chunk of this movie, and kind of towards the end I had an idea, but a lot of times as I was watching this movie, I was like, okay, what's this movie about? What is this movie like? If someone was to say, what's it about? How would I describe this movie? How
Like
would you
the
guys describe
message,
it? Yeah, or like what's it about?
the
Like,
statement.
sure, yeah.
Well, I would narrow it down to two things: are the moral of this film.
Okay.
One is that war is bad for everyone. War is just bad. And the second is that specifically war brings out the worst in everyone.
Okay.
So war will devolve you as a person, and obviously that would take spoilers to get into that with our main characters and how it does it with them. But yeah, I would say those would be the two messages I took from it. What do you guys think?
James?
I generally agree. I don't have much to add to that.
Yeah, I think the other one I got out of this was just, I think Alex Garland was really trying to say the importance of war journalism as a piece of documenting history. And specifically, Kirsten Dunst has that one line, and James, you kind of alluded to this, where she says, we don't decide what's good or what's right or wrong. We document it so others can.
Yeah, I think there's two lines that she said. The one that you just mentioned, and then the other one that you might sum up the movie is like, I used to do this in other countries. I always thought it was a warning to never do it here.
Yes.
Of thing.
Yeah.
Definitely she has all the good lines in this movie.
Oh,
the other
sure.
characters
Yes.
are just like there to serve Kirsten Dunst's character for the most part. Which I kind of like.
There's a pretty famous photograph of a starving child somewhere in Africa with a vulture standing about 5 feet away looking at it. And the photographer that took the photo really struggled with the ethics of that, because he's basically filming a child right before death. And instead of like swooping the child up and feeding him, kind of a thing. And that photographer actually ended up committing suicide. Because they were haunted about what happened, kind of a thing. And so there is this ethical dilemma, right, of the observer, of the reporter, of the photographer. Like, we need to capture what's happening for posterity so that other people know, so that otherwise this never happened in a way. And it's true, right? If it's not documented, it didn't happen, like, because the victors will decide the narrative if there's no evidence to the contrary. But on the other hand, there is that ethical idea. Like, if you take that ethos to an extreme, you are really ignoring a lot of your humane instincts. Like, there has to be room for like a middle ground where you don't just think of it as coldly as that, because then I feel like in a way you're participating with the most evil around you. What do you guys think of that?
I mean, so I think. Yeah, I hear you're saying, like, if you're just a bystander around evil, then are you now contributing to the evil? But I think it's also something like, if you are in a country and there is famine happening, right? Like famine on a tens of thousands, if not greater. Then there's a question of like, oh, do I help this one child? That's not going to solve the issue, but it's also like my humanity can help this one person. I think that's a real moral dilemma of like, I mean, 'cause I can't solve the issue, but can I help the one?
The issue is a million ones.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So it's definitely a perspective, but maybe not as balanced as I was hoping it would be. But in general, I love the idea of the war photographer. That's a little bit, we get that tiny little bit with Kubrick's work, right? He does a little bit of that concept in Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, okay. In Full Metal
Oh,
Jacket,
okay. I was trying to think which one you were getting.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I was to the index and I was like,
like Past the Glory, no.
Let's see.
Yeah. With the Joker character, he's a war correspondent, right? Yeah.
Doesn't he work for the military though?
Yes, he works for the military.
Right.
Yeah.
For some reason, I think of that differently.
Oh, sure.
I don't know. But you're right. They're both technically the press.
Yeah. I don't think we've anyone answered the question if we liked this movie. We've talked a lot about it, but I still don't know if you guys actually liked it or not.
James?
Sure. I liked it. Generally I liked it. I kind of wish, we haven't really talked about it, but supposedly the most expensive A24 movie ever made. Biggest box office opening for an A24 movie. Supposed to be their foray into quote unquote big budget filmmaking. On that front, still felt like an A24 movie to me. Like, I understand that there were a couple sequences here that are much bigger than what they would typically do, and that's probably where that money went. But it didn't feel like a movie that's going to make $300 million. You know what I mean? And that's big budget filmmaking. Like, that's your goal, is to make that kind of money. So maybe the talk about this movie and all the things it represents from an A24 business perspective kind of goes out the window, because I think they're trying to make mid-budget movies again. It's just mid has moved at this point.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think they're trying to make 300 million. I think they're trying to make 100 million.
Right. And I think I think it'll be successful, and I think it feels like a mid-budget movie.
Right.
And so I was a little, it's hard for me to ding what we actually saw for that, because maybe that was like just the chatter before and the marketing pretty much only showing the money shots in the trailer. Like, if you've seen the trailer, you've seen the bulk of where the money was spent on this movie. There's no surprise sequence, I would say.
I actually have not seen the trailer.
Well, you're lucky. I kind of wish I had not seen it, because then I wouldn't have known what I just said out loud.
Sure.
As if you've seen the trailer, you know every sequence of cost. Yeah. Anyway. So probably not a fair complaint.
Kyle, what'd you think?
I didn't think it was a perfect movie, but also I liked it as much as I like most of his movies. I think they're pretty specifically made. Even if you don't like it, you can tell there's a style here. There's a specificity of direction and writing that Alex Garland has that only auteurs have at this point. You know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine him ever being a director for hire for somebody else, even though clearly he's a writer for hire for other people, or was. What'd you think, Zach?
I want to hear what Kyle thought.
Okay.
Yeah, it's this is a movie where I thought a lot about it, and like even during the movie, I was at first thinking, do I like this? And I think I come on the answer of I do like this movie. I definitely, some other Alex Garland projects I could say I love and just hit me right away, and this one took more time to get there. But I think this movie is very well directed. To say, I mean, up front, like it's well shot. The action scenes, Alex Garland's done small scale action before, but nothing to this size. I thought they were very well done. I mean, there's one specific I want to talk about in spoilers, just because I found that very just affecting to see an action scene like that happening in a specific location. And I think that to enjoy this movie, you need to go in knowing that it is not like a red state versus blue state Civil War movie where they're trying to take our current politics and extrapolate from there. It's just more of like you said, Zach, this is a warning of, hey, Civil War is bad anywhere. This is how it will look in our own country, and the importance of the people who document these kind of conflicts.
Yeah. I think in general, I was ambivalent about this movie.
Okay.
Maybe leaning on not liking it, not enjoying it. And I would say for a couple of reasons, I really had no preconceptions about this movie going in. I knew nothing about it, essentially. I knew it was called Civil War. To be honest, I forgot when I saw it that it was by Alex Garland. In my head, it was by the two guys that did Game of Thrones.
Oh, Benioff and Weiss.
I have no idea why I thought that.
Okay, interesting.
So be it. Anyway, it didn't weigh too much into my thinking on anything. But I think in general, this movie disappointed me in a lot of ways, but like also had like things that I enjoyed seeing, like the Jesse Plemons stuff. I enjoyed the last 20 minutes, things like that. So that's why I'm fairly neutral on the film. It's a neutral of like positives plus negatives rather than like just not caring, I would say. In general, so I think this movie really missed an opportunity, because I think a really good movie about the Civil War in America, a future Civil War in America, could be a masterpiece. It could be a landmark film, right? It's like the perfect time to make a masterpiece about that topic right now. Like it would be right on the pulse, I think. But what I think it would have to be, much more than this movie is is like a Heart of Darkness, like an Apocalypse Now, where like as you go deeper in, things start to unravel.
Mm-hmm.
And in this movie, that was not the case, right? It was pretty straightforward as far as like the reality of the situation or the craziness or the madness, right? With Apocalypse Now, right? The deeper they got into the jungle, the crazier the world got. Even a really good parallel is Alex Garland's own film Sunshine, right? The closer they get to the sun, the gravity of the sun itself is warping reality and changing even the filmmaking and the character motivations and everything is like affected by the just the pressure of the gravity as they get closer to the sun. That's a Heart of Darkness story. This one, it didn't have that kind of like, it really should have notched up and gotten crazier in the way that some other directors absolutely would have. You know, like I'm talking about how like Aronofsky would have done.
Right.
You know, I would love to see Aronofsky's Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Or a totally different direction this movie could have taken, which I also would have liked better, is like the movie Contagion, right? Like the movie Contagion took us from normalcy, whatever, and showed us every little domino falling until we get to the end, which is just like total collapse. And I think that would have been very interesting to see on screen, like to see those dominoes falling. And you still could have, you don't have to tell it from a macro level of like this general and this president, you know what I mean? It could still be from like this microcosm, but like in the same way Contagion, you know, is a lot like that. I think that would have been more interesting. But this movie instead was much more focused on the war photographers. It gave us very little details of the actual Civil War itself, except for the fact that war is all around us at all times, you know? From a photography, I mean, I'm a photographer. From a photography aspect, it was feast and famine a lot. Like some things they would do was, I felt like very authentic. You know, like some of the ways they would talk about their craft, I felt like was very authentic. But then actually to watch them do it, it just seemed very unlike what an actual war photographer was like. You know, like very early on in the movie, an explosion happens and she takes her sweet time to take her first photo. Like I think like 40 seconds pass after the explosion happens for her to take her first photo. And that is just not my idea of like the sense of capturing the moment that a war photographer would have.
You're talking about
You
in
know?
the street?
What's that? Yeah.
You're talking about the explosion in the street?
Yes.
Like you wanted to be more like rapid shooting, just like shutter, shutter, shutter.
No, not
Okay.
necessarily that. But for the first photo, it just so without talking too much about it, she's crouching down, assisting someone.
Yeah.
She stands up. She starts walking, and then about 15 seconds later, takes her first photo. And it's just there's no sense of urgency whatsoever to like capture the moment, you know. And that's repeated throughout the film. Like, James, I can see you're getting skeptical already.
Totally.
But
I disagree. I think that moment from my memory is slow motion. And she assists that person and then immediately gets up and runs into the action. And then the next shot of her is taking photos. So you don't know when she took the photo.
let me ask you this, James. Of what we know about this character.
And really what the movie is reiterating in that moment and the moments that directly follow is that the one person acts on instinct to do exactly what you're saying she doesn't do. And the other person is shell-shocked because she's never been next to an explosion before.
No, I disagree. And here's why. If there's one, no, listen to this. Listen, James,
Okay.
I want you to really listen, okay?
I'm listening.
If there's one thing we know about this main character,
Sure.
right? It's that she believes that the importance of the photo is important to the extent of if someone else was getting shot in the head, she would take the photo of them getting shot in the head.
Right.
Right? But the first thing we see her do is instead of taking the photo, helping someone. Right?
Well,
it goes against the character that like we're trying to establish. It's the opposite of what she is like philosophizing about the whole movie.
I I don't disagree. I'll disagree that she's choosing to assist somebody instead of not ducking behind the car herself. You know what I mean? She wasn't putting herself in harm's way. She'll help somebody if it doesn't, impede.
Oh, yeah. I want
Were
to
you
add in.
expecting her to take a photo of the girl instead of pulling her below the car? Or
No, what I'm saying is she made
What
sure
are you
the girl
getting
was
at?
okay. She made sure the girl was okay first.
all right,
Before she got up and walked towards the scene. Yeah.
But okay, but she was
she's not.
she was also okay. So I don't want to spoil the.
Let's move into
she-
spoilers because I'd
Okay,
love to
yeah,
talk about.
yeah. 'Cause I want to talk about this, but I think we talk about like the series of events that leads to this because
Sure.
I may be disagreeing a little with Zach. Too. Okay,
Go for it.
All right, let's bottom line 30 seconds or less, Kyle, and give us a rating.
I'm gonna give this 4 stars.
All right.
Not the masterpiece, but I still liked it.
I also gave it 4 stars. I think this sits well in the middle of roughly in the middle of Alex Garland's filmography. What did you think, Zach? 4 stars. For me.
I gave it 2.5 stars.
All right.
Okay, I think 2.5 is very fair based on how you talked about this movie.
Sure.
Sure. I mean, 2.5 is average. I think that's a little low for this movie, but
Did you think it was an average war film or better than average war film?
I don't really think it's a war film. It's a film that
What-
happens to take place in a war, but it's not interested in showing much of the war.
What is it? And then is it a better than average version of that?
That's a thriller drama.
It's
on
a
some
better than
level.
average thriller drama.
Sure.
Okay.
It's not a masterpiece. A masterpiece would be a 5. It's a 4. It's a good
Sure.
thriller drama.
Sure.
All right. 2.5 and 2 4s for Civil War. Let's talk spoilers. We're going to talk them right now. And so
Yeah.
I'm just giving you a little bit of time to hit pause on your player if you want to. Consult the show notes if you want to skip spoilers. And if you don't, listen on. Okay, should we start at the scene we were just discussing? Because it's kind of towards the beginning, right?
Right.
Sure. It's the first thing.
We're talking about like in a city like New York. I don't think they actually say New York, but in a city like New York.
Yeah.
Do they say New York?
I'm pretty sure it's New York.
Okay. Anyway, in a city in which there's really not a lot of war going on, there's still a lack of resources, and there's a bunch of people in the streets fighting over access to a water truck.
They hide behind an NYPD police car.
Sure. Right.
I remember that.
Somebody blows up the water truck, and these 2 reporters, one played by Kirsten Dunst, who's the grizzled, seasoned war photographer, pushes Kaylee Spaney's, very green, wannabe photojournalist character out of the way behind a police car as an explosion goes off. And then, stop me if I'm leaving something out, Kirsten Dunst quickly checks with Kaylee Spaney's character to see how she is, and then immediately stands up and starts photographing everything.
It's actually not what happens.
That's what
not
happens, right?
That's how I remember it too, James.
No,
Totally
it's-
what happens.
No. What the difference is the word quickly. She
It's
spends
in
a lot
slow
of
motion.
She slowly gets up and slowly walks into the action.
Wait, but I don't remember if it's in slow motion. Of course, she slowly walks up and slowly gets
Right.
to the action.
No, but slow motion of someone moving slowly and slow motion of someone moving quickly looks different.
Oh, wait, so you're saying like you wanted her to like pop up and get right into it, and in this case, she was more like dramatically standing up. Is that kind of the difference?
No,
Casually standing up.
Okay. Did you just want her to be taking like trick shots between her legs? Is that what you were missing from this scene?
I think this is what blows my mind. Is I think the whole point of that scene, maybe not the whole point. One of the points of that scene was to clearly show that Kirsten Dunst is awesome. Like, her character is awesome. She's done this a million times. She knows when to duck behind a car because an explosion's about to go off. She's saving the life of like somebody who would be considered lower rung than her, like the inexperienced person. She has the opportunity to save that person. She does what she needs to do to check him, like you would do in a real war situation, and then immediately goes to do her job. That's generally what I saw the movie saying about that character.
What I'm saying is she doesn't immediately go to do her job. She really doesn't. If you watch it again, she takes her sweet time.
Sure.
Okay, this did not stand out to me whatsoever. But like, I get
This
it.
is such a
like,
weird thing to pick on.
No,
It's just I'm a photographer,
He's a
so I'm
photographer.
obviously watching the photographers.
Yeah,
Right,
life
it's-
doesn't
it's
move
like-
in slow motion. I get it.
It's like
In
me
the movie
watching
it does.
Bernstein and being like, oh, well, this is not, yada yada yada. Like,
And
I
this was
get-
just one of many examples from the movie where I thought the photographers, in some ways, did not act at all like photographers.
So I kind of want to talk about Kirsten Dunst in DC.
Okay.
Let's jump to the back end here.
The end of the movie.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
another example of the really unevenness of her character arc.
Right, 'cause
I did
she
not
seemed
understand it.
Like shell shocked for.
She's cracking up.
She's cracking up, and I guess I was trying to figure out what made her crack. What
Her
was
mentor
it?
dying.
Okay. That
Yes.
Yes.
So this photographer, like throughout the whole movie, is presented as like she has seen it all. Man,
Yeah.
I mean, it has affected her personality, right? She has demons haunting her from what she's seen. And so she's lost all emotion except her impulse to do the work, you know? And then in the end of the movie, her mentor dies, which is obviously traumatic and terrible, but not necessarily on a whole nother level of anything she's already experienced. But during DC, the reason she's there, and she is cracking up. She is being dragged along by her colleague. Like she is losing it. Exactly like she said Katie Spaney would be doing.
right.
Which again is out of character for her. I don't understand the motivation. And then snaps out of it again for no reason. And then it's
she
fine
does,
again.
She does snap out of it.
Isn't that
Could it-
odd?
Could it be? And again, this could be a fault of the movie not giving us enough on her. Could it be that like this is the first time that it was personal for her? Like she's been neutral this whole time. And I'm not just saying in this conflict, in war photography. Yeah, like she's photographed terrible things, but like she said, it's always been terrible things happening over there. And could this be the first time that something terrible happened here and affected her personally? Where she
I
wasn't
would
just
venture to guess that is absolutely the case.
okay. So like again, the movie I will agree does not do a great job of quite explaining why she's losing it for this moment. But I wonder if it's because like it actually became personal to her, like the violence. This is as close as she's ever gotten to the violence actually affecting her.
I think it's crystal clear what the movie's telling you about her over the course, and then in that moment, exactly what Kyle said is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the movie is very intentional in showing that like she's a hardened war photographer, but she's also a human, right? And so even if these credos that she says to Kaylee Spaney to scare her out of doing the job because she knows what it's done to her, those credos only go so far if you're a human being. When the rubber hits the road, instead of just ducking yourself, you pull the other person down with you, no matter how hardened you are. Or what's another situation? There's a couple the one at the very end, which I'm sure we'll get to, is certainly her not acting as a war photographer, but her acting as a human being.
When they go to rescue Kaylee Spaney and the other guy who like drive off in the car, there's
Right.
no reason they had to go stop and put themselves in danger.
If it's solely about the story, they wouldn't have done that.
They would have kept going. They would have said, "Hey, well, she left." And
In fact, the only person trying to talk them out of it was the mentor character, which is interesting. I think there's a clear dichotomy with that character that's played out from the beginning of the movie all the way to the end. And I'll agree that maybe it's not quite as on its face as like a Transformers movie tries to make human relations seem like.
Wow.
But the reality is when you are watching a film about characters, it's going to either spoon feed stuff to you or like have you discover it through the story itself. This movie definitely goes to the extreme of just having you discover characteristics of people over the course of the story. Does not put people in buckets at all.
Can I disagree strongly with that?
Sure.
I feel like it is spoon feeding us a ton of what's happening in two ways. First, we are told over and over and over again that she is a war-hardened photographer who has lost her emotions because of what she's experienced, right? Like, I mean, that's text. That's clear throughout the movie. And then there's no subtlety in the fact that she is losing it in DC. Like, she is like crying, like looking at the ground, can't move. Like it's not subtle at all.
Yeah.
I would have liked some subtlety of the the transition. Also, I would say Joel, her colleague, the producer guy, he's been through the same stuff she has. He's not experiencing any of that. Maybe it would have been more like thematically relevant to have both of them having a hard time, and Kaylee's the one that pulling them along. It's just he was totally fine after he got out his catharsis in the base.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So he wasn't totally fine. He did have his moments where he was losing it, but he lost it in the base,
right,
at a different point.
The point is not that she's not human anymore. Like, she can have these emotions, she can care about humanity. The point is she has built herself in a way so that when it counts, in the moment, get the shot, right? Like that's her ethos. So for her not to be able to get the shot in that moment, I think is interesting thematically. I give it that. It's interesting thematically. It's just that Joel, her colleague, was totally fine. I didn't really, when it happened, when you first saw her cracking up in DC, your first thought wasn't like, oh yeah, of course, her mentor, It was like, oh, that's strange. Like they didn't lead up to that at all, or that she was really cracking up. It was like, oh, she is cracking up, And then it just snaps off. Like, she's back to normal again, right? Like, what transitioned her back?
Well,
I don't remember.
I think what transitioned her back was when they thought that the president was escaping, right? The motorcade takes off, the forces surround it, and then she kind of, I don't know, it's intuition, or kind of realizes like, oh no, this is a decoy. I think the president's still in there. So I think that's the moment where like her professionalism kicks back in. Yep. Where she was able to be like, oh, okay, like, no, this isn't, the story is not out here. The story's in there. We need to go in there.
Okay. Do you know what I was impressed by? They ostensibly built a whole another White House.
I was watching that, and I was like, well, there's no way the White House let him film this movie in there.
Oh, of course not.
I found that segment so upsetting. Like, just the idea of there being this open armed conflict in the White House. And like, I know we've seen it before in like fantasy movies. Like, there's White House Down. The X2 has a mutant invade the White House, but something about like American military forces in the White House, no matter who, if the Nick Offerman president is the good guy or not. I just found that to be very jarring and upsetting to see that whole sequence of like, God, yeah. I don't want to see that in real life. There's no way I want to see footage of, Secret Service fighting with American troops on those grounds.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, that's why January 6th was upsetting to a lot of people.
It was very upsetting, yes.
Despite the fact that it was mostly nonviolent, it was still pretty jarring just to see people break windows to get in there.
Yeah.
And that was small fries compared to what this movie depicts, for sure. Let's talk about that ending, right? They're in the White House. They're scanning rooms with the Western forces, and they're getting resistance from what looks like Secret Service guys style protection for the president. And the Kirsten Dunst character is getting... Was she getting most of the photos, or was the other girl at that point?
I remember Kirsten Dunst running like across the hallway a couple times, shooting photos outside the Oval Office.
Right. It's a pretty intense shootout situation. At one point, the Kaylee Spaney, the younger reporter character, moves into the line of fire, and the old grizzled war photographer steps in front of her and takes the bullet, essentially sacrificing herself for the younger colleague. And right after that is the money shot taken by the younger colleague of the president giving up. Did they actually shoot him or not?
Yeah.
Oh, they shot him.
Right,
well,
they shot him because they say like the only way to get rid of him is to actually kill him. Yep, which is also a very Trump sentiment, I would say. Is even if Trump's not in office, we have to deal with him because he won't shut up like most people who lose elections. All right.
I think it's important to point out that when Kirsten Dunst pushes Kaylee Spaney out of the way, right, and she gets shot, like she essentially takes the bullet, Kaylee Spaney takes a photo of Kirsten Dunst dying. right? Taking
Sure.
those bullets,
Right,
And which was like the first question Kaylee Spaney asked Kristen Dunst at the beginning of the movie. Would you photograph my death?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I thought that was interesting.
Think it's the central bookend of the movie.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. I felt like they wanted that moment so much. Like it's so integral to the film, right?
Mhm.
Like that's at the conception of the movie. That's one of the babies that they needed, that they wanted to build the film around, right? Is that moment. I just wish it was, I don't know, maybe handled a little less clumsy.
It was a little, yeah.
Like,
Right.
That's the only moment that she runs out in the line of fire in an odd way, standing directly in the middle of the hallway. And then Kirsten Dunst pushes her down and stands in the middle of the hallway.
Over
I
her.
feel like in that situation, you push someone into the wall and go with them, right?
With your momentum, exactly.
I mean, that's like, I feel like a natural reaction. Instead, she pushes her down and stands in the line of fire.
And looks at her disappointed, like, you child.
Right. And I just feel like it's such an unnatural blocking, but it's necessary for them to get their moment that was so important to them, you know?
Mhm.
And then Kirsten Dunst falls. Kaylee Spaney never looks at her, gets up without looking back at her at all, which, while I think is unnatural to the character, absolutely fits with the message the movie wants to say, right? It's like saying like, no, she has lost her humanity in a way that like war will do to everyone. And she doesn't care about her mentor and friend. She cares about the shot. And like, that is a loss of innocence. Like thematically that all works. Even if it doesn't work character-wise, I can forgive that. But if the shot is what's so important to her, like pick up the girl's camera, right? Like this woman has been taking half of the photos of the moment and she just leaves her camera behind. But like that film is what you care about now. So pick up the camera.
Okay. I have an issue with that.
Yeah,
The issue
it's
is
crazy.
there's a much more important thing happening, as in the forces have now entered the Oval Office.
Right. They're right
And
next to the Oval
they're
Office.
right there.
She's thinking about getting in that room.
Right.
Because they're about to grab the president. She's not
That
thinking
camera's
about,
not going
let's
anywhere.
pick
That
up
camera's
the
on a dead body
woman's
now.
camera.
Like they can easily grab that camera on their way out. That didn't bother me. Again,
Kyle,
I know you're a
real
photographer.
photographer
so-
would have picked up the camera.
No, what I'm saying is that would have absolutely underscored the thematic message they're trying to give, right? That the photos are more important than the people in that sense. Like if she didn't even look her in the face, but grabbed her camera and like took off, that would have been a good moment.
Okay.
It would have like increased the message, but instead, like, who cares about her photos? Like, I just want my like amateur photos.
Well, I think. Okay, I want to talk about that final photo. Okay. Right. So they get in there. They shoot the president. Very very politely. Like one shot into the chest of the heart. I was like, oh, that's a nice shot. And then there's this. The movie ends with this black and white shot of like the Western forces standing around the president's body. You don't see his head in that photo.
Right.
And that really bothered me. That like someone wasn't he's laying on the ground, right, with his feet towards the camera, so his shoulders and his chest are blocking his head. It really bothered me that someone wasn't like holding his head up off the ground just to be like,
it's not
this
a
is
positive
actually
ID.
him, right? Because let's be honest, I'm sure their climate in that movie is probably very similar to our climate. If people just had a picture in the White House with like a suited body, they'd be like, well, that's just a Secret Service agent. Like, there's no way that it's actually him.
Right.
So.
Especially because it's a staged photo, because the people have switched sides of which side. Like people had rearranged themselves from when they were during the shooting.
It's posed, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a staged photo. I don't know why they didn't show his face.
Yeah. And I think that would have been more, I mean, let's be honest, I think it'd been more gruesome too if you have these smiling people like kind of holding up this slumping head of a dead body.
Well, because this is the like Gaddafi moment, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And they talk about that too. Like, you know, like how Gaddafi goes, how all these dictators go. They all kind of go with a whimper.
Right.
I mean, it's the same reason why we don't show anything about the death of Saddam Hussein. We don't want, like, at that point he had an insane following, even though the movie presents him as a tyrannical, you know, like dictator type. And so I think they're just not going to glorify him. I don't know. It's one photo in the movie. I'm just saying, I think that's why you would do that.
I
Not hold up his head for everybody to, you know, look at. It's
And
like,
I think you need the proof of body.
but we don't. When we got Osama bin Laden, we didn't do that. We could have very easily taped every moment of Osama bin Laden, of us disposing of Osama bin Laden's body.
Well, they
There's
did take a
reason
photo
why-
of his body.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. There's a photo of his body. Yeah.
I know, but none of it is going to be believable to people who don't want to believe, right?
But they made sure to take it.
Sure. I believe far more than just that exists. They're just not going to put it out there.
Right.
Right? Why? It's because the people that are going to believe that are going to believe that no matter. You could give them full motion video with the guy singing or reading Hamlet. You know what I mean? It wouldn't matter. He's not dead to crazy people, basically. Only time makes you believe that somebody's dead when you're that obsessed. There's still people that think Elvis is alive and hiding.
I think it's a lot less than like when we were kids, though.
Sure, but there still are.
Yeah, and there would be less if we had a picture of Elvis's dead body.
Sure.
Yeah. I want the toilet picture. Release the toilet picture.
I mean, there's people that believe Kurt Cobain's not dead, and there's plenty of public photos that say otherwise.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know how we got into this discussion.
No, I know, because it's the you gotta
And-
show the head.
This I will say, I'm not as confirmed on of if this would happen or not. I just know if I were Joel, the producer guy,
Mm-hmm.
I would at least have my cell phone out with the video running. Like, he's kind of worthless, that entire DC sequence. I don't know why he's risking his life and not videotaping anything with his cell
Oh,
phone.
yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I remember there's like a shot where he's in the background and he's writing something in a little pad. Did you guys see that? It's literally like at the gates when all the craziness is happening and they're ducked behind.
Sure, possible.
Yeah,
Write it down.
the concrete.
Shooting, White House, President limo.
I don't know what like print reporters do. Maybe they do that. I have no clue.
No, possibly. I just have from like news crews that I've seen, the producer is usually also videotaping, but
Sure.
who knows?
Well, I mean, I thought in general there was a pretty old school attitude to journalism going on in this movie. You know what I mean? I think even war photographers are probably wearing, GoPros and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was a pretty old school depiction of.
Yeah, they're shooting on film
journalism.
half the time.
Right. Yeah. All right. Anything else spoilery with the movie?
I do want to say a couple more things.
Okay.
Please.
I thought the pacing of the movie was a little bit less than I desired, in the sense of it's mostly talking. There's really slow parts of this movie where it's just two people chatting, kind of a thing.
Sure.
And I've seen such good examples of world building, like Children of Men, where there's so many little details of this world peppered in that just is so intriguing. So much of this movie is just spent in these kind of dialogues that like do tell you more about the characters, maybe a little bit more about the world, but it's just there's a lot of slowness for not as much benefit as I get in some of these other films. My favorite parts of this movie and like movies like this are where you get like, oh, we're gonna pay $300 in Canadian dollars, like those little nuggets are like, yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that, but yeah, that's cool. Like I like those moments, and there's not enough of them in this movie for me. And again, there's a lot of slow kind of moments. And then the other thing is, I do think that there's certain beats that they want to hit. And to get them is they are willing to be very contrived to get those beats. And one of them is to get Kaylee Spaney in the other car. This is the car that gets abducted by Jesse Plemons. And that was probably my favorite scene is the Jesse Plemons scene. So we should talk about that. But it felt very contrived to me that he climbed into their car and then she immediately climbed into the other car. And that was the catalyst for her getting abducted, is that she's in this other car and that they're separated from her. That moment felt very inauthentic to me, that she like climbed into the other car.
See, I guess I saw it as this is a young woman who has probably not experienced a lot of fun in her life. Right? We don't know how long the Civil War has been going on for. And she wants to take a very serious approach to it, being a journalist. And I think this is a moment she's like, oh, I can do something fun in a unfun world that she lives in.
Yeah, I mean, you can explain it. Again, she left her camera in the car, which I feel like she wouldn't have done. I think she would have taken it with her. But you can understand that, like, to get to Jesse Plemons, she had to be separated from the others.
Yeah.
So to separate her, they had her climb into the car. To have her climb in the car, they had someone else climb into their car, and she sees it. Like, it's just, you can see these direct dominoes to, like, why they had her do what she did. The real reason she did that was to get to Jesse Plemons. It was not because she's a carefree 23-year-old, and that's what she would do. It's because we had to get to Jesse Plemons and she had to be separated, and that's how they got her to do it.
Okay, so you thought it was just kind of clunky, like to get to these big moments, the in between was a little contrived.
It felt contrived to me.
Okay,
Never second guessed it.
It just felt
Made total sense to me. She
Zach,
wants to be a war photographer. She wants to be a daredevil. She's like running into danger as a career choice. And so the idea that like she sees another journalist do something crazy and she's like, I want to do that too. That's like her whole character. The whole movie is her following somebody with her tongue hanging out, just saying, I want to do it too. So that was that moment. Just a reiteration of that. So from a character perspective, I never second guessed it.
From a plot perspective, did it feel clunky to you?
I mean, I don't know if my criticism would be clunky. I feel like
Or
not enough
contrived?
time passed for them to get caught and then walked over to a ditch before the other car comes. I think probably there's some criticism to be had there for like what's the actual timing of these events. But I think you could pick apart a bunch of this movie if you wanted to, pick apart timelines.
Did you guys like the Jesse Plemons section as much as I did?
Well, I just want to back up a little bit.
Okay.
Having driven a Toyota 4Runner of that vintage, they don't go that fast.
Why were they driving? So they were driving in parallel, and like you really got the sense that they're driving quickly, like 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Why not slow down at that point? I mean, like they're going so fast.
Yeah, like, and then they take off and like they lose them. I'm like, that 400 can go 80 tops. Trust me on that one. It's not going that fast. It's not like a must. Yeah. All right, Jesse Plemons scene.
You guys think too much while you watch movies.
Well, I'm sorry that we are a thinking men. I know James goes, oh, movie.
Yeah.
Ooh, bright, loud. Sorry.
Blam, blam.
Blam, blam. I like the pew pew parts.
That is how I watch movies. So
I enjoyed having Jesse. I had enjoyed having Jesse Plemons and Kirsten Dunst on screen together.
Yeah.
Even though, like, who can anyone play a scumbag better than Jesse Plemons?
No, he's good at it.
Like he's obviously he has rage. He plays other things besides scumbags. But I was like, yeah, of course, Jesse Plemons is playing like the racist militia guy. Who else would you get to play that role in this day and age?
Yeah, and you compare this to the last time those two were on screen together, Power of the Dog. They're just two very different situations for sure. And then on top of that, aren't they married in real life?
They are married in real life.
Right. Yeah. So it's just it's interesting that they do good work together for sure.
Zach,
that was
what did you
easily
like?
the moment in the movie that I didn't know what was going to happen. Like I thought anybody could have bit the dust in that scene. And I was ready for them to kill off a main character. They do, but not in the way you expect, for sure.
You're thinking it'd be Wagner Moura who'd get killed off in that moment.
I was expecting one of our main four people was going to get a bullet in that scene. And they do, but not the way you expect, essentially.
I think if they had more courage, it would have been Kaylee Spaney or Kirsten Dunst. Either one of them, either one of them, and then the other one goes on to get the photo. Either one of those would have told a thematic story and had like much higher stakes.
I think if they were to have done that with the story this movie was telling, it would have been Kirsten Dunst. Because then they would have Kaylee Spaney pick up the next. But see, the problem is if they did that, though, Kaylee Spaney didn't have her camera and she couldn't have photographed Kirsten Dunst's death. Like I think, as you were saying, Zach, kind of the big thing in this movie was photographing the death of the other.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Jesse Plemons sequence was not a sequence where they could have photographed this moment, because it really was like the war is happening to us right now. Yeah.
Okay, this is not this movie, but how awesome of an ending would it have been? Like, honestly, like in the theater, this would have gotten such a good reaction.
Okay.
If we get to the end, she goes to take the photo and it's like, click, she had run out of film, and then the movie just ends.
And then the Curb Your Enthusiasm music kicks in.
No, but like that would have been like a good, interesting, like everyone would have been like, right at the end. It's like all of that work to get the shot, and she didn't get the shot, and like, what does it say about like how unimportant all of this is, like in the midst of war, kind of a thing.
I think it would have been better. I don't know how you would have done this, and it probably would have ruined the flow of the end of the movie. But if she had deleted the photo, like Kirsten Dunst's character does earlier on in the film when she photographed a colleague dying, essentially.
Oh, okay. So she takes the money shot, she looks at it, and then just deletes it from her. Unfortunately, she shoots on film though, so she can't delete it.
Sure.
She could take out the film.
There's problems, but
if she rips out the
film, it's gonna ruin the whole
delay,
role.
As much as I like made fun of like photographer stuff in this movie, there's other stuff that's great. Like when she's talking to her on the stadium benches, and she's like, "Don't worry if most of your photos are terrible. Like 31 ratio is fine." And like she's just slowly going through until she finds the one photo that she likes. Like that's a great moment, you know. And like when they stop, when there's a helicopter in front of JCPenney's, and she says, "Pull over the car.
Oh yeah,
get out. I want you to take this photo. This will be a good image." That is a great moment, because that is absolutely how a photographer mentor would mentor someone else. Is like, no, I would normally stop and take this photo. I want you to take this photo. Now, I thought the movie was pretty clunky about how it handled it, because she then took a photo of the helicopter when like the actual photo that she should take is the helicopter in front of JCPenney's, which is the photo the movie gave us, right? That's what the movie showed us. Right. A helicopter crashed in front of a JCPenney's. That image is this movie. A helicopter crashed in front of JCPenney's. This girl took a photo of the helicopter. Like,
and you
no
know
JCPenney's
context
in the
for
background.
where it is. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's no JCPenney's in the background. So she flubbed the photo, but I can forgive that because she's a new to this kind of a thing.
I mean, would you have wanted Kirsten Dunst to be like, "That's not the photo, back up"?
I mean, I think that would be a cool moment.
Right.
But, you know, her just stopping and having her take the image was that moment anyways. It just would have been doubling down on the moment.
I mean, the most realistic version of that is Kirsten Dunst to rip the camera out of her hands and be like, "You can't tell this is the better photo. I think it's time to quit."
And then make fun of her and move on. I loved when they made fun of each other.
Yeah. No, I did like their relationship.
Yeah.
I think Zach likes this movie more than he's willing to admit.
I think Zach is being a little hard on this movie because it is not maybe the 5-star masterpiece he was hoping to see. And I want to keep talking about Zach in the third person.
Zach, were you hoping for a 5-star masterpiece? I mean, you always do, right?
Just like your comparison to Children of Men, you brought up,
Apocalypse Now.
Jackets, Apocalypse Now. Like I wonder. I think your I think your criticisms are valid. So I'm not trying to say like you're wrong in that aspect. I do wonder if you're being harsh on this movie because you have all these other comparisons of like, oh, it could have been this, but it wasn't that, so it has to be down here instead of like it can be here instead of way up here.
It's possible. I don't think I'm middling on this movie. I think there's lots that I liked and lots that bothered me. I do think that it fumbled a really great idea at the perfect moment.
Okay.
Because if a masterpiece could have been made here for sure. This is the idea that it could have been a Children of Men. It could have been an Apocalypse Now, or any of those films, but it wasn't. Unfortunately,
I'll agree that it's not those.
It's not a masterpiece.
Right.
And because it's a little sloppy at times, like, again, there's a war happening, right? We know that. We know very little about it, or like where the fronts are, or that kind of things. But anytime we see confrontation, it's like 3 guys shooting at 3 other guys. And it's like, what are the battle lines? Like, are these 3 guys just in the middle of like enemy territory, just like shooting at an office building? Like, Like when she's shooting the shots of like the guy trying to save his friend and he gets shot, the one that she likes from her film camera, you know?
Right.
What was that confrontation? Like, can someone like tell me, like, who are the three enemy combatants shooting at the other enemy combatants? Who's out of place? Like, who's not where they should be? And how did they get there? And why are they there? Like, it really is so muddy. Like, it doesn't make sense.
I don't think it mattered to this movie why what we saw in that skirmish was happening.
I agree, but it another movie could have made it make sense, and it did matter, and it would be all the more for it, you know?
I mean, what I'll say is in that moment, we saw the guys that they embedded with, they were in civilian clothes. They looked, I don't know if they were militia, but they were wearing just like regular shirts and pants with Kevlar and rifles, right?
Not even regular. They were in Hawaiian shirts.
They were Hawaiian shirts. That's true. That's true.
Thing.
Yes,
yeah.
But ostensibly they belonged there. Like they lived in that state, ostensibly, right?
Yeah,
because they're not in military gear. They're not traveling from 1,000 miles away in a Hawaiian shirt to fight this battle.
I think there's shades. I think that's why we didn't talk about like the bigger picture of like all the forces and stuff like that, or the fact that most people's criticism of this movie is that Florida or Texas would never gang up with California, stuff like that. Because I don't think most of that matters to the movie. But I think there's, broadly, you've got a president taking too much power. You've got very powerful states trying to secede because of this. The president, in an effort to keep them from seceding, takes way too much and eventually orders drone strikes on those states. That's the central question that all the reporters want to go ask the president before he gets arrested or killed is, was it worth it?
Right, yeah.
And so I think that portrayal is pretty much all you need to know about the players in the movie. Like, from that, you can extrapolate that, like, people who didn't like the amount of power that the president is taking, they would gather together. Even if ideologically on abortion or hot topics they disagree, I think it's very clear that California and Texas, if both felt threatened by the power of the president, those two would gang up together to get rid of that president.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me at all. I find that believable.
I mean,
but also on that side would be all the militias, even the ones on the right that like people would say are racist and stuff like that. They would actually be fighting the federal government at that point. Yeah, I think all the militias would be dictator on some level. Although if it was Trump, maybe not.
I would say in that skirmish we saw, I thought it was a local force, a local militia fighting against the American armed forces or the president's forces, whatever you want to call them.
The federal forces.
The federal government's forces, yeah. So
it's kind of how I interpret it. I just don't know why there's three of them in the middle of Kansas or wherever they are.
I think they're in Pennsylvania or West Virginia or something.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, I think, Zach, you had a very valid criticism that this movie would have been great as if the closer they got to DC, the more unraveled things got. Like an Apocalypse Now, as they get closer to Kurtz, the crazier it all gets.
Right.
So I think that could have been the masterpiece movie. This is a road trip movie, and this is not a Heart of Darkness movie.
Yeah, that's what's maybe odd to me is that it's 100% the same skeleton as Apocalypse Now.
Right.
Getting closer to Kurtz, like, and experiencing these like things and episodic kind of things on their way. And it even has this countdown, how many miles they are from DC.
Right.
Like it's the same skeleton, but without that element, it was maybe just odd to me.
The most Apocalypse Now moment to me was like the sniper fight outside the Winter Wonderland.
Yeah.
Because that was something where like there's the middle of this bright field, there's this Winter Wonderland, and then shots go off, and you've got these two guys, the sniper, you don't know who they represent. And, they're like, what are you doing? He's like, are you stupid? And they ask the other guy, like, what are we doing? He's like, you're shooting at the guy in there. He's like, exactly. We're fighting them. And so that felt like the Heart of Darkness moment. And there could have been more of that. Maybe the movie I'm picturing is like, as they get closer in, I mean, there's looting and like chaos and like, just
naked people and, people with eagle statues. And it just gets nuts. I don't know.
And then you get to like right around the White House and everything's pristine and normal. Yeah.
Something. I don't know.
No, I hear you. I hear you on that.
I think the movie's worth seeing, though.
Would you amend your 2.5, or would you keep it? Like, if you think someone should see it, and then they see you gave it a 2.5, is that going to push them to see this movie?
I don't know, man. I think 2.5 is appropriate rating for me right now.
Okay.
Even though I would say, here's the thing. I think most people have a reaction to it. So go see a movie that you'll have a reaction to. I'm all for that. A lot of movies I hate, I want people to see so they can hate it with me.
Sure. All right. Is that it for spoiler?
I think so.
Great. Let's move on to our top 10 list for this week. It's the top 10 films of Alex Garland. This list, Alex Garland has not directed 10 films, but between his writing credits and his writer-director credits, we have rounded out the list at 10.
I have 9. I don't know where you're getting 10 from, but I will add to my list as we go if I'm missing something.
Zach, do you have The Beach on your list?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, I watched it specifically for this episode.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's your 9 then.
Yep.
Okay.
Basically. All right. I'll go first with my number 10. You guys might disagree with this, and I definitely need to give this movie a rewatch. At number 10, for me, it's Never Let Me Go, which he was a writer on. Don't remember much about this movie, even though I've probably seen it since the start of this podcast. So, I mean, that's been 10 years. It's possible. It's been many years, but not more than 10. I don't remember much about it, to be honest. But I did give it a 2.5 when I logged it on Letterboxd. Why? If one of you guys scores this over the 5th place, I want an impassioned reason why I should give it a rewatch.
Awesome.
Well, James, to make you feel any better, my number 10 is also Never Let Me Go.
Nice.
Yep. And I think my biggest issue with this is this was too much soft science fiction for me, where there is an interesting world that's built. And I think this has to do with essentially people being cloned to be replacements for real world people.
Mm-hmm.
I think this movie is like The Island, but not the Michael Bay version of it.
Okay.
And this movie is much more of a character study of the ethics and the morality of this system. There's a love triangle. I think Keira Knightley and Andrew Garfield are in this movie, plus a third person. And
Carey
then
Mulligan.
Who's the third person?
Carey Mulligan.
Carey Mulligan. Okay, yeah. And then for me, this movie was too soft science fiction, and I wanted more of like, what's this world that we're existing in?
You wanted
and this movie is more about like the world doesn't matter. Let's talk about, or the world matters, but let's not talk about why it is. Let's talk about let's not talk about the how. Let's talk about the why. And I wanted more of the how.
Sure. I don't have a number 10, so why don't you guys roll into your number 9s?
What's your number 9?
My number 9 is The Beach, which he's credited as original writer. Same with you, Kyle?
Yeah, my number 9 is also The Beach.
Perfect. Well,
so for you guys, it's the writing.
What do you mean?
When he's writer, not director. That's at the bottom of your list.
No, I have some high.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah. No.
It's going to be a mix for sure.
And he is not the writer of The Beach. He's the writer of the source material. And then someone else, whose name I can't remember, took Alex Garland's book, turned it into the script for The Beach. So Alex Garland is one removed from the actual Beach movie.
Okay.
So Alex Garland wrote The Beach, the book?
He wrote the book that the script is based on.
Okay.
But someone else adapted the script.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Zach, you haven't seen The Beach? You should see The Beach. I think you'll. I mean, Kyle just watched it. Kyle, should he watch The Beach?
It is.
If you liked it.
I think The Beach. No. I think The Beach. This is my number. I like Alex Garland, and that's why it's my number 9. I think The Beach is worth it for like the final half hour, because the first like 90 minutes is kind of like an overacted, overdramatic, like Leo's story about trying to find this utopian village that's not the utopia he thinks it is. And then this is directed by Danny Boyle. And I feel like for 90 minutes, Danny Boyle's trying to make a mainstream movie. And then for the last half hour, he's like, screw it. And he just goes full like independent, weird Danny Boyle. And I was so on board for the tonal shift. I wish the entire movie was the same tone as the final 30 minutes. I think most people hate this movie because of the final 30 minutes. Do you remember what I'm talking about, James?
Sure. I mean, if the whole movie was that tone, you wouldn't have loved the tonal shift because it wouldn't have existed.
No, but what I'm saying is I liked where the movie went, and I kind of wish that tone was throughout the whole movie.
Gotcha.
Like the movie kind of starts there a little bit, and then becomes pretty standard, and then goes crazy for the last 30.
Yeah. I think most people who haven't seen this movie should check it out. Definitely Zach should, just because it's like young Leonardo DiCaprio and like an oddity in his filmography, I would say.
And
I've always been curious about it. I would say.
He's not great in it. Like it is not a good. I don't think it's a great performance from Leo. Like this is what he did after Titanic, right? Like his Titanic and then The Beach.
Well, there's nothing amazing in the Titanic from him either.
No, but like Titanic made him a star. So like,
Sure.
I think a lot of people saw this movie because like, oh, this is the boy from Titanic, and then they got The Beach.
I agree,
So,
but
yeah.
and I like Leonardo DiCaprio as an actor, but there's a reason it took like him well into his 40s before they gave him an Oscar.
Yeah, I guess either Romeo and Juliet maybe after Titanic, but
yeah, but it's in that zone of time where he's still a young actor who's figuring out how to do this, and he's taking. Like I think Danny Boyle was not. He wasn't Steven Spielberg at the time. You know what I mean? Like
no, he was still trying to figure out how to make movies mainstream. Also,
exactly, for sure. Yeah, it's great.
It's not great.
It's not great, but it's good. It's a moment in time, and it has flashes of greatness. I would argue. The jungle scenes are pretty awesome and memorable. For sure.
And the soundtrack is so early, like late 90s, early 2000s techno EDM, like Moby's playing during moments of it.
Right.
Like Megan was kind of like half watching it next to me, and she's like, "Is this like my high school CD collection?" Like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Definitely. Okay.
Zach, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is Annihilation.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah.
Just wait till you find out where it is on my list.
Oh, number 1, I'm sure. My written directed by Alex Garland. So I did not like Annihilation. This is a movie I absolutely will rewatch, either with Kyle or without, whatever you'd prefer.
Come to my house, watch on the 4K on the 65-inch.
Sure,
It'll look amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure. In its shimmery goodness. I've talked enough about Annihilation. To be honest, I find, and this is an odd realization as I'm looking at his movies, so many of his movies, for me, and I tend to remember movies pretty well, are forgettable. In the sense of like, I really lose track of why I felt so passionately about these movies. And so maybe it's because I've talked about Annihilation so many times, have only seen it once, that I like focus on these individual little moments. But I would say, in general, the feeling I had as I was watching this movie is that Alex Garland is intensely interested in science fiction topics, but he has a poor understanding of science, in the sense of like, I feel like he has scientific topics that he talks about, but the way that he presents them is fairly unscientific. And I just find that so distracting. So this movie, like in The Shimmer, like animals evolve, like mix their DNA and stuff like that. But like, that's not how that would happen if that happened.
But it's alien technology though. Like it's
Sure.
not natural. It is. I mean, would you say that aliens would be supernatural?
No,
aliens are not supernatural.
no, they're natural, just from a different planet.
Okay, all right, fair. That's true. I guess if it exists in our world, it is not supernatural.
Right.
But could we also do the laws of evolution that apply to us apply to aliens?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
They would have evolved the same way.
Interesting. Okay.
And so, so it's just, you combine an alligator DNA with a duck DNA. You don't get a half alligator, half duck. You know, it's just like, it's an interesting idea, but it's just not at all how it would play out.
I don't think you get hybrid animals in that movie.
Again, I'd have to rewatch it. I don't remember.
I don't. There's definitely there's definitely evolution of animals.
You don't get hybrid animals?
I don't remember there being any hybrid animals.
In my mind, there's like a water scene or something where like maybe they're in a boat and a alligator duck attacks them.
An alligator doesn't like a crocodile attacks them, and I would say it's not a crocodile of our world. Like it's definitely like it has rows of teeth like a shark, but they never say like, oh wow, that's a crocodile with shark DNA. Like they're just like, oh, this is a different alligator than we are used to, or crocodile, whatever you call it. I guess
it sounds like an alien alligator, is it? I thought it was like DNA splicing between human things within the shimmer.
I don't think they explain. There definitely is a collection of DNA that is combining, right? But I don't believe there's any hybrids.
Yeah, they're called mutants.
Yeah, it's more mutations. That's a better word.
Okay. Well, I'd be curious to rewatch it again and refresh my memory.
Okay.
I think you'll like it more the second time. It'll probably become your favorite film of all time.
I would love that. That would be amazing to go from a 1.5 star to my favorite film of all time.
Every time you watch it gets a little bit better.
Yeah. But I just remember finding it's silly over and over. In the same way that Prometheus, the science of that felt silly to me. In the same way Interstellar, the science of that felt silly to me. It's just like, why have a hard sci-fi and then the science is so like middle school? I don't know.
I think I need to watch it again now, and I'm really gonna pay attention to like the science. No, I really am this time. I really am. So.
Fantastic.
I mean, they also have like an orb that absorbs a person, creates a clone. So I'm not quite sure where the science is on that. Like at some point, there just is crazy alien things going on.
Again, it also, in a similar way to Prometheus, and I know I'm alienating James every time I say that, it has people just making constantly dumb decisions in a way that like, so for instance, they've sent team after team into the Shimmer and they never come back and we still know nothing about it, right? And so now they send in this team. They walk into the Shimmer, look around, it looks crazy, and they keep going rather than immediately leave again and tell people what's inside, right? Like the whole problem is they have no idea what's inside. So like send in a team for 5 minutes and then send them back out again just to at least update you on what's happening inside. But instead, like they go in and then they also get lost like every other team they've sent.
Right. Well, it's because I'll admit the movie does not do a great job of explaining this. And we can talk about this a little bit later.
This is a trend with Alex Garland. He doesn't
right.
like explaining things.
In the Shimmer, there is a loss of sense of time and place. Mm-hmm. And this is also in the book Annihilation, which I have read. And like people go in and then they're like, where am I? When am I? And so the only thing you can do is go forward. There is no going back because you don't know what back is. You don't know where back is. There's just forward.
Okay. I'm not sure the movie presents that. It seems like the plan was to go forward, but you know what? Again, I'll watch it again.
Yeah. Okay.
Are we on number 8?
We're on number 8. Yeah.
That was my number 9.
Right. We're getting all the controversial ones out of the way, I feel like. Whereas the consensus picks are mostly going to be up at the top, I imagine.
Yeah.
My number 8, I don't think will be too controversial. It's Men from 2022, which is a weird little movie for sure. Even for Alex Garland, I think this is an outlier as far as the weirdness goes. I think normally he's weird realistic. In this one, he's just he's doing whatever he wants to tell the story he's telling, for sure. And that mostly worked for me, but also, like, of all his movies, I'm looking at the list right now, the one I'm least looking forward to rewatching is probably Men, just because it isn't a movie that is intended to be a feel-good movie.
It's pretty unsettling.
For sure. Definitely. My number 8. Kyle?
My number 8 is Dread from 2012.
Low.
Yeah. So this movie I didn't see until 2020, and this movie was pretty hyped to me. And not just, I don't think from you guys per se, but just like, I think in general, the consensus was like, oh, this was an underwatched movie and it's, way better than you think. And Carl Urban's really good as Dredd. And, there's all this cool stuff happening in this essentially skyscraper fight. Like the movie is just one long skyscraper fight in this dystopia, future America. I think it's like Los Angeles or something. Mm-hmm. And I found this movie just to be incredibly violent, to the sense of goriness, of like flayed skin and heads exploding. Like it was too violent for me, but the action itself wasn't very inventive. It was just kind of standard action. And the movie lacked what I thought was going to be like a satire edge to it, because like this is in an overblown world where, you have these I think they're judges, Judge Dredd, and they're kind of judge your executioner. They can decide your political legal fate on the spot. And I was really hoping for like a RoboCop level of satire, because like RoboCop is hyper violent, but also really poking at corporate America and corporate greed. And I think Dredd was hyper violent and kind of missed the satire aspect of things. So I was overall underwhelmed by this movie.
All
cool.
right.
My number 8 is also Men. And I think Men is an experience. This is a movie that I gave 2 stars, but I would encourage people that want a crazy experience to watch it, because you just haven't. I've seen some crazy movies, but this is just something I hadn't seen. I think it's the least Alex Garlandy movie to me of all the movies on the list. Like if I have a sense of like kind of what he does, this one seems maybe more Cronenberg than Alex Garland.
Or Aronofsky also, maybe.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. And man, it really haunts you. It's a haunting movie. Don't ever watch this. I don't recommend this. It's creepy.
If you want to talk about crazy
yeah.
final 10 minutes.
Yeah. So my number 8, also Men. 2 stars.
Nice. Back to me. Number 7, Civil War. We talked about it.
Before I do my number 7, I just want to quickly say that Dredd, Alex Garland is credited as the writer for. However, Carl Urban has said in interviews that Alex Garland took over as director of that movie too. So even though Pete Travis is the credited director, I believe this is a secret directed movie by Alex Garland.
Okay.
All right. My number 7 is Men. So it's in a very similar spot. I agree with everything you guys had to say. It's a messy movie. It is mixed. There is some crazy things that happen, which I had never seen on screen before. What I liked about this movie is it's such a swing. And I think I gave this movie a 1-spot bump for just being so out there and trying something completely different. Even if it didn't quite work, and even if it did not help my I don't like Jesse Buckley movies feel. At least this movie is taking a big swing. It was a big miss, but credit where credit's due on trying something different.
Yeah. My number 7 is also Civil War, just like James again. James, could I take from this that your 1 through 7 are 4 stars and above?
Yeah. Civil War is 4 stars and above.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't realize you're such an Alex Garland fan.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know why you wouldn't realize that. He released half these movies since we've been doing this podcast.
Yeah, that's true. There you go.
All right.
What's your number 6?
I mean, he makes great movies, which is why it's hard to put Sunshine at number 6, because that's a 4-star movie for me. That's a great movie. This is his kind of like hard sci-fi space movie, kind of aliens, but not at the same time. I like this one a lot, and it pretty much, I'd say that movie probably introduced me to the idea of Alex Garland. Like, certainly there were movies that he wrote that appeared before he wrote Danny Boyle's Sunshine, but for some reason Sunshine was the first one where I was like, oh, this is Alex Garland and Danny Boyle. Like, Alex Garland is like a name now to me.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6.
My number 6 is also Sunshine. And I think this is a perfect example of a sci-fi movie that has a great setup, a great middle, and just kind of flubs the ending. Because the final act of this movie becomes a monster movie where the first 2 acts are all this hard sci-fi about the sun, as you mentioned, Zach, before, like the gravity of the sun, how things get crazier, the sun's dying out, this whole plan to reignite the sun, how it affects these people. And then we go monster at the end. So, I don't know if that's the fault of the writer, Alex Garland, the fault of the director, Danny Boyle, but someone messed up in that 3rd act of this movie.
I mean, the writer has to write that it's a monster movie at the end.
I love that about it.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite part of it too.
Really? Okay. That's what I did not like about it. I liked everything leading up to the monster movie.
But that's definitely the writer's like thing, right? I mean,
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the director could also be like, "This is a bad idea. I want to go
For sure.
go rogue."
And then he
this."
becomes the co-writer.
right. Exactly.
My number 6 is 28 Days Later. Or is it weeks later? Which one did you do?
Days.
Days is the
Okay.
Days.
And I gave this 3.5 stars. I like this movie. I don't necessarily have a lot to say about it. I mean, I saw this movie so long ago. I enjoyed it at the time. I don't know. Again, some of these movies like really slip my mind.
Crazy. A movie that doesn't slip my mind at all. Annihilation, my number 5.
Oh, you guys.
You feel that's low? I feel that's where most people would put it.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this movie. I've only seen it once. I need to rewatch it for sure. But my original watch was that it was strange and kind of a little. I guess most of his movies are muted. It felt like it could have been a different movie. It could have been an Aliens where you've got lots of shootouts and stuff like that. It's not that type of movie, yet it feels like it lives in those types of worlds.
It's pretty melancholy.
Yeah, for sure. And
it definitely has threads of Alien though, like in it.
Yep. And I thought the ending was so unexpected from my perspective that I really dug it. And I'm not sure exactly what's happening in those final scenes. I don't think all the answers are provided to all the questions, but I enjoyed the ride the first time through. Who knows if it'll be as effective the second. Also, the mutant bear scene is maybe the most horrifying thing Alex Garland has ever put on film. For sure.
No, I would say the ending of Men is the most horrifying thing he's put on film.
I mean, the ending of Men was definitely a little repulsive, but I'm not sure I was scared.
Oh, I see.
for
Okay, I see.
anybody's
What you're saying.
life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas
Right.
with the mutated bear, that's never going to leave my brain.
Yep. My number 5 is 28 Days Later. I don't remember a ton about this movie. It's Cillian Murphy's in the role. It's got, I think the first time I remember seeing Fast Zombies, it starts the same as The Walking Dead with a character waking up in a hospital in the midst of the zombie apocalypse. And I really wonder who did it first, because I know Walking Dead was a comic book before it was a TV show. So I wonder if that was who cribbed who. I'm assuming that Walking Dead came out before this movie. But I remember this movie being just pretty dark also. Just it's sort of the depravity of man during, man's the real enemy during a apocalypse like this.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Absolutely.
My number 5 is Devs, which is the miniseries by Alex Garland. And I think of the three of us, I was the first to watch this. I might have recommended it to one or both of you. I don't exactly remember the chain of command.
I think you recommended to James and then eventually made its way to me.
Okay. I found this miniseries fairly engrossing. I mean, once I started watching it, I wanted to keep watching it. I really was intrigued by the premise, by the drama, by the intrigue. The acting was all really good. Nick Offerman was awesome. Lily Chan was awesome. Or, Sonoya.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So again, this movie or this miniseries, I was very intrigued by, super interested in. I thought it was really well handled until it wasn't. I think it brought up so many great ideas of the quantum mechanics and many worlds hypothesis and determinism and all these kind of things. really interesting ideas. And then I just feel like it broke its own rules and kind of fumbled the ball a lot about how it dealt with those. And to go into it, it would be massive spoilers for the show. But just in general, it all built to one thing and then pretended like another thing was true, and it just didn't make sense in a way that I really felt it fumbled the ball in a way that was just weird. And that whole last episode didn't make sense with the rest of the show. So that was unfortunate, but I did find it super interesting. So it's my number 5.
My number 4 is Dread from 2012. Love this movie. I mean, it's if you can't stand subtitles, but you really want to watch The Raid, check out Dread.
It is The Raid. Yep.
It's basically the Raid, but with the Judge Dredd IP kind of injected into it. Although it's compared to the Stallone version of Judge Dredd, this is barely Judge Dredd. It's just like kind of a costume for your main character, more than a movie about the judges and Judge Dredd and the world of Judge Dredd. It's more about just making an action film with a cool character at the center of it. Doesn't he like barely talk in the movie too? Like he only says a handful of words through the whole thing.
Yeah, he's mostly talk a lot.
It's mostly action sequences and other characters providing context for things. I like this movie, even from an action perspective. The idea that people are on drugs and these drugs like slow down time, and the visuals of some of the fights while people are on drugs, I thought was super interesting. And it's the movie. If I had to make a list of movies I regret not seeing in 3D, this movie would be pretty high on the list, because I think the action and the visualization of the people on drug trips would have been wild in 3D. And yet, when this movie came out, I didn't even catch it in a theater. I think it came and went so fast. But yeah, my number 4, Dread.
Nice.
My number 4 is Civil War, which we discussed already.
Very cool. My number 4 is also Dread. This movie's awesome. It's a lot of fun. It's very visually inventive. You know, like it's unique and fresh. I haven't seen an action movie like this presented this way, and I really enjoy the kind of like Die Hard 2, like all in one building kind of conceit.
I watched in November of 2020. Maybe I was just depressed when I saw it.
It's possible. Yeah. Speaking of depressing movies, my number 3, 28 Days Later from 2002. Cool movie. I remember reading articles at the time about how cheaply or inexpensively they made this movie, and then when I watched it and I saw that they had like cleared the streets of London for shots, I was like, wow, that's crazy. Yeah. And then I think maybe this movie in my brain is more of like a legendary movie, like the legend behind the making of it, and the idea that a lot of the people involved in this went on to make things I enjoy even more. You know what I mean? You've got the main character played by Cillian Murphy. He goes on to all kinds of things that I love and hold dear to my heart. And then the director as well goes on to a bunch of stuff. And then I learned later on, maybe 10 years after or so, that also the writer tends to be somebody whose work I enjoy. Just a lot of great things that all kind of started with 28 Days Later for me.
My number 3 is Devs. And Zach, I agree with you that this movie or this series is great until it isn't. But I really like the great parts of it. And this feels firmly like an Alex Garland project, even down to the music. That's something we haven't really discussed with Alex Garland. And I can't remember who the composer he works with. And there was a little bit of that style of music in Civil War, maybe not as much as we see in like other movies like Ex Machina, Annihilation. But I think Devs has incredible music to go along with the visuals and this story that's exploring quantum mechanics and, choice and free will and all those things. So yeah, I really like this. And when you guys told me about this show, I had no idea this is an Alex Garland project. So I was really excited to explore it.
Very cool. My number 3 is Sunshine. 4-star movie. Really enjoyed this movie. I like that it is one thing at the beginning, and then as I get closer to the sun, it becomes a different thing. And I think it's a really beautiful movie. I really like it a lot.
I think I need to rewatch Sunshine.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest.
It's probably been a long time since you've seen it.
Yeah, it was probably over a decade ago that I saw it.
My number 2 is Devs. Love this. Even the ending. You guys have a problem with the ending? I loved it. I don't think you guys always need answers, but I think some of the ambiguity is what I enjoy. Maybe the discussion we had around it buoys the piece itself, like the idea that you can debate some of the works of Alex Garland is part of what interests me as a filmmaker. He has the balls to kind of like leave things open-ended enough or interpretable. Is that a word or a phrase?
Open to interpretation?
Sure, open to interpretation. Well, it's not even that it's open, it's that he kind of leads you towards different interpretations and lets you choose.
Well, that's open to interpretation then, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's not open to interpretation because it's sloppy. I think it's intentional. You know what I mean? Like he leads you down paths without closing the doors. Anyway, love Devs. Would love for some of these projects to have been longer form pieces. I thought him in longer form worked very well. Yeah, I mean, like if a movie like Men was a 6 to 8 episode miniseries, would it play differently? Would you have more time to sit with these characters? Could it have gotten weirder a little slower than what the movie plays out? Or even Civil War, there's probably easily a 6 to 8 episode prestige series in here that could have been interesting. You could have followed more characters than just the reporters. I'm not saying that would have been better than what we would have gotten. I'm just saying I need more Alex Garland in longer form because it worked pretty well for Devs for me. My number 2.
My number 2 is Ex Machina.
Well, that's fine. That's actually my number 2 also. So
okay. You go
also
first.
Ex Machina.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
First.
Okay.
Yeah, I like Ex Machina. It's interesting.
That's all you had to say. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also like Ex Machina. I think this movie is great, and this was my favorite Alex Garland film until another movie came out later, which you'll find out about. I mean, this movie is it's the idea of of this human running a Turing test against this AI, this human-looking AI, this human acting AI, this human, attractive AI is so fascinating. And then also, as you're just kind of trying to suss out everyone's motivations, this is a movie where you don't quite know everyone's motivations, including the computer's motivations, as it's going through its motions. The presentation is amazing. It's 3 people. It's Alicia Vikander, Domhnall Gleeson, and Oscar Isaacs, and all 3 of them are great. And I really enjoy this movie.
Cool. Yeah, I thought it was good. I really liked it. The CGI is great too.
Yes.
Sure. I agree. It's my number 1. For some reason, I have it as a 4.5. I think maybe it's a 5-star movie for me. I'm not sure it gets better for me when it comes to Alex Garland or the type of story that Ex Machina is trying to tell. I think that's maybe the perfect version of this, or the closest to perfection as I can imagine. I think it's a perfect movie to define what you can expect from an Alex Garland movie. That's kind of his best case scenario film so far, and seems to play on all of his strengths.
I actually think that he benefits from having a closed system. So like Civil War, right? It's an open system. There's so many things happening in the background and over there and around and in this whole world, right? And I thought it was sloppy because it didn't necessarily fit those together. With Ex Machina, with Sunshine, with Dread, these are very enclosed stories, right? They all take place in one location with a limited number of characters, and I think it benefits from that.
Yeah,
he can write a tighter story.
Well, my number 1 is Annihilation. This is my favorite Alex Garland movie, written and directed. What I like about this movie is the Heart of Darkness presentation. where you have this team of scientists, soldiers, medics who enter this unknown space, and as they travel through it, they get closer and closer to the center, this destination. Things do get weirder and weirder. Team members start to get picked off or leave, and then eventually you're left with Natalie Portman, who is facing just something inexplicable happens to her at the end of this movie that is very much open to interpretation. And I really like those Heart of Darkness style journeys, and this movie is definitely within that vein. I will say that I think Ex Machina is the tighter script of the two. Like if I was to compare apples to apples, like which is a better written and thought out movie, I think Ex Machina is the better thought out movie of the two. But personally, I just like this Heart of Darkness journey that Annihilation gives me. They're both top 100 movies for me, and they are very close in my top 100.
Very cool.
Really, they're both in your top 100.
They're both my top 100, and there is not a lot of daylight between them. So there is a world where Ex Machina could be my number one movie at some point.
Of all time.
Of Alex Garland, of this list.
Oh, okay.
Not
Okay,
of all
okay,
time.
okay.
No.
I was going to say, wow. He is Kubrickian, evidently.
No, he's not Kubrick. He's not Kubrickian at all. But
As a super fan of Ex Machina, without getting into the debate, can you just weigh in? Do you think that the robot stabbed him, or he just walked into her
that's right,
knife?
to walk back into.
I
this.
feel like Kyle's already given us.
I
his
think I've
answer
weighed
on
into this already.
Yeah.
And yeah,
He agrees with you, Zach.
my weighing in is that it was a stabbing. It was not a backing into.
Gotcha. My number one is James's number 10, Never Let Me Go, 4.5 stars.
Okay, so this is also my number 10. So please,
Just tell us why we need to rewatch it. What did we miss?
and my number one's your number 9. So we
Yeah.
are on the exact opposite of the spectrum here. So
Okay, are you ready for my full defense of Never Let Me Go?
yes, please.
You don't remember
interrupt
much
you.
about it either.
I logged into Letterboxd and saw that I gave Never Let Me Go 4.5 stars.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And that is the only thing I remember about this film.
And that's
I
why it's
literally, I remember the actors are in it. I remember having fond feelings about the film. I literally can tell you absolutely nothing about this movie, which again blows my mind. I mean, I feel like movies I like, I can tell you everything about them. I remember them very vividly. This is a 4.5 star movie, and I just don't remember a thing.
So why isn't Ex Machina your number 1 then? Is that also 4.5?
Ex Machina is a 4-star movie.
4-star movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of low.
So yeah, I'll rewatch Never Let Me Go, and I'm sure I'll have a great time. I'll rewatch it for the first time, right? But yeah, it's 4.5 star movie for me, and I just really do not remember it whatsoever.
I mean,
Did
it's
you
been
like the
9
world
years.
building or the relationships better?
I do like world building quite a lot. in
Well, there
movies.
is none in this movie, so
I wouldn't know. I would have no idea.
It's been 9 years since you watched it, Zach.
Sure,
According
and that's
to
a long time,
Letterboxd.
especially for a soft film like I'm sure this is.
oh,
Yeah.
it is in my review. I say this is soft sci-fi. It is not,
Yeah.
not a yeah.
All
But
right.
it's just an interesting thing that I've noticed about some of the films on this list. They really don't stick out to me, but it is what it is.
That's the only one that doesn't stick out to me.
Yeah,
All the other
great.
ones I have vivid memories of most of it. Maybe not the details, but certain scenes have stuck in my brain for sure.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode 629 of the Cinereelists. It was good times talking Civil War and the top 10 films of Alex Garland with you guys. We didn't include 28 Weeks Later, even though he's rumored to be an uncredited writer on that movie. I just wanted to say it would be at number 8 between Men and the Beach for me, were we to include that. Anything else before we get out of here?
What are his upcoming projects?
I think
He-
there's only
so-
one.
He said that he may step away from directing. He may just go back to being a screenwriter.
Interesting.
So Civil War might be our last, for the near future, Alex Garland directed movie.
He has one upcoming in production directing thing. It's called Warfare.
Okay. So maybe Warfare could be our last Alex Garland directed movie.
Right. And he also supposedly wrote 28 Years Later, the third movie that they're working on right now.
Okay. But yeah, I don't think at least he's talked about not wanting to direct much anymore.
Okay.
Interesting. I mean, I'm sure it takes much longer to actually see a story finished, but you have more control over it if you're the director.
Yeah, but I also think as the director, you possibly have to make more compromise because of you have people to answer to, which is a studio, which is producers. Sure. Whereas as a screenwriter, I mean, in theory, you could write the script, send it off, and then at that point you can say, "Hey, I wrote it, and they made it, and however they chose to make it, that's out of my hands." Sure. So like there is a level of removedness if you're the screenwriter.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why his filmography is interesting, at least in my estimation, is it's mostly bangers. Even like the ones that have issues are at least interesting movies to watch. And it's because when he was the writer, he had Danny Boyle making his movies, mostly. You know what I mean? And so even the ones where he's just the writer on them, they're good movies for the most part. So... All right.
So Warfare is about a SEAL team during Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Interesting.
Okay. Cool.
Based on a true story.
Another realistic movie. Oh, based on a true story. That would be a first.
His co-director is one of the characters in the film.
Interesting. Seems like a strange thing for him to make a movie out of.
The co-director is the real person who played?
Yes.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Oh, okay.
Ray Mendoza.
Mendoza
is such a movie name. Mendoza, get over here.
Well, Mendoza was the name of the bad guy in all the McBain movies and on The Simpsons.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I never watched The Simpsons.
Really?
No, never cared.
Do you know?
Really?
Like,
that surprises me.
Throughout several seasons, they would show like clips of the McBain movies on The Simpsons. And you can take like 3 or 4 of them, and it actually tell like a complete story of like a story arc. But they just broke it up over multiple seasons of the McBain saga. So
it's very Community of them. Doesn't that feel like something Community would have done?
Or Arrested Development.
Yeah, right,
for sure.
But Simpsons did it because Simpsons always did it first.
Sure. All right. Thank you for listening to episode 629. Don't forget, there's a video version of this podcast on YouTube. Check it out there. Support us on Patreon. Leave us an Apple Podcast review or send us an email to heyguys@cinereelists.com. You could also follow us on social media on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or Twitter. You can find us at Cinereelists on any of those. You could also find me on my personal Twitter, Letterboxd, or Blue Sky account at EOJRB.
You can follow me on Twitter or Letterboxd at Shabin.
You can find me on Letterboxd at PeterSKB.
2 out of 3 of us will be back next week to discuss Rebel-Moon Part 2 M-The Scargiver, which is on Netflix. It's directed by Zack Snyder. It's the sequel to Part 1 of Rebel Moon. Forget the after the M- title on that one.
It was like Child of Fire or something like that.
Right. Which 2 of us? You'll have to find out in a week.
I guess my question is, are you 2 going to rewatch the first Rebel Moon before seeing Part 2 as a refresher?
Are you kidding? I watch it every day. I don't have to rewatch it.
Oh, is that why it has more views than Barbie? It's because you're watching it daily? Okay.
That's why. All right. We'll see you guys next time. Until then, keep it cinereal.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.